Hello, class. Today we shall derive the quadratic formula. So if you remember, the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. So, how do we get there? First off, we start with the generic quadratic equation, a x squared with x to the second power plus bx, x to the 1, plus c, which you can think of either as a constant or with an implicit x to the 0th power, which would still be 1 times your constant, so still a constant. So, how do we complete the square? Remember, our coefficient for the leading term, which needs to be x to the second power here, must be equal to 1. The coefficient must be 1. So to get rid of this a, we're going to have to divide this entire thing by a. And this too, but 0 out of anything is still 0. That leaves us with x squared plus b over a x plus plus c over a is all equal to 0. So we're going to have to, first of all, get this term to the other side. We're going to have to remove that. So x squared plus b over a, just move that term to the other side, equals negative c over a. And remember, because we are completing the square, we need to take half of this term and square it, and then add it to both sides. That will give us a perfect square on the left side. So x squared plus b over ax plus b over 2a, half of this coefficient squared, equals negative c over a plus b over 2a squared, because we have to add it to both sides. So, from here, we find that the left side, it's very conveniently a perfect square. So, we have to take x plus half of this coefficient, b over 2a, square the whole thing. And remember, so, the whole thing, this will be equal to what we have on this side, so let's expand this side first. Plus b squared over 4a squared. So, to make to add these fractions together, remember we're going to have the same denominator. So it looks like this has 4a squared. Let's try and multiply this entire thing, just this term, by 4a over 4a. You multiply that term, you're left with, it's kind of cluttered, left with negative 4ac over 4a squared. And you add this, you get negative 4ac plus b squared, which should look very familiar because, oh look, that's the same as saying, since we can add these together, that's the same as saying b squared minus 4ac all divided by 4a squared. So let's get back to the set over here. So since this is a perfect square, because it's the stuff inside the parentheses squared, let's take the square root of that. That will leave us with x plus b over 2a. But because we are taking the square root of this, we also must take the square root of the other side. So the square root of the other side is this, and this down here, as it so happens, is also a perfect square. So we can simplify this even further to say x plus b for 2a equals square root b squared minus 4ac And the perfect square, the square root of that is 2a. So, last step, we're going to move this term to the other side, and that will leave us x equals negative b over 2a plus negative b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And because we are dealing with squares and exponents to the second power, when you take the square root of a positive number, it can either be the positive square root of a number or the negative square root of a number. So we also have to consider the negative possibility. And since these have the same base, we can add them together. So that leaves us with x equals negative b plus or minus, remember we have to consider both the positive and the negative square root b squared minus 4ac. And remember, because we had the same denominator here, we can just stick them together. We can divide it all by 2a. And that's how you derive the quadratic formula by completing the square.